Today I'm going to show you how to make medical booties for the healthcare facilities in your area if they need them. Please keep in mind that before you make anything for donation, you want to check in with your local hospitals and healthcare facilities to see what kind of home sewn products that they are asking for, and if there are any specifics that your local facilities are asking you to comply to. Our local facility asks for medical booties that are similar to real estate size booties. So I actually used these one size fits all real estate booties as my template for this pattern. And it's really simple. It works up very quickly, and it'll fit both my 5.5 size foot and my husband's size 13 foot. So they're very versatile. The materials you're going to need to make a pair of booties are 2 squares of cotton fabric. The squares will be 16 inches by 16 inches. You'll also need 2 strips of fabric for the drawstrings. These are 1.5 inches wide, and if you're cutting them on their own, you can cut them 28 to 30 inches long. And if you're cutting them off of your freshly cut fabric from the fabric store, you can just fold the fabric in half and then cut parallel with the cut edge, which is perpendicular to your selvage, so that you get a 44-inch long piece. But we'll be using these for the drawstrings. One thing that is really important to do is to pre-wash your fabrics in hot water using unscented laundry detergent. That is mainly to help pre-shrink the fabric, because we're working with 100% cotton here, and we don't want the cottons to shrink when the people who are going to be using them every day over and over again are laundering them and sterilizing them. The other things you'll need are a pair of pinking shears if you have them. Pinking shears are just scissors that have a zigzagged blade. If you don't have pinking shears, I'll show you what you can do instead. You'll also need a pair of small snips or scissors to cut your threads, and a large safety pin. You'll also need to have your iron hot and ready to use. So the first thing we're going to do is take our 16-inch square fabric and just fold it in half. I'm working with a cotton batik fabric, and a batik is basically a very tightly woven 100% cotton fabric, so it works really well for this kind of thing, and it has no right side or wrong side. So if you look at each side of this fabric, they look about the same. One side isn't darker or lighter than the other one. If you're working with a quilting cotton that has been printed, you'll notice that the print is stronger on one side than the other side, and the other side will either be white or a neutral color or look very faded compared to the top side. So that side that has the vibrant print on it is called the right side of the fabric, and the other side is called the wrong side. So when you fold your fabric together, you want to fold it in half with the right sides together. So what you should be looking at if you're using a fabric like that is the faded side, or the side that doesn't really have much of a print on it. I'm working with a batik, which doesn't have a right side or a wrong side. Both sides are pretty much the same, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay, so to get started, lower your presser foot, and then we're going to do a back stitch here to secure our stitches at the beginning of the seam. So we're going to stitch forward for 2 to 4 stitches, and then we're going to stitch backward over those stitches, and then we're going to continue down the whole length of this seam, and we're going to back stitch again at the end. That back stitch just helps secure our stitches so they won't unravel with wear. Okay, so here at the end, I'm going to go to the end, back stitch, and then sew off my corner here. Trim the threads on both sides of your seam. And then we need to finish this seam. If we don't finish the seam, it's going to continue to unravel. You can see that these threads are kind of already unraveling off the side of the fabric here. Finishing the seam will prevent that from happening. If you have a serger, you can serge this edge to kind of lock all those threads in. I'm going to be using pinking shears and just zigzagging this seam with my scissors. If you don't have pinking shears or a serger, you can set your machine to a zigzag stitch and zigzag stitch down the other side of this seam pretty near the raw edge, and that will also finish your seam. Since I have pinking shears, I'm going to just cut along the edge of this fabric here. You don't need to cut off very much, just a little bit, just enough to make sure that all of the raw edges are now zigzagged instead of straight. Okay, so this side is finished. Now we're going to turn it around and do the same thing on the other side. So I've got my square over here at the ironing board, and you can see that my sides are sewn up already. Now I'm going to open this up and slip it over my ironing board at the tip of it. We're going to create our casing now, and what that means is that we're creating the channel for the drawstring to sit in. So I'm going to just press my seam down here so that it stays in place and give it a little bit of steam. That will just help that seam to lay flat in the future. And then we're going to fold this edge over about 1/4 inch. You can use a little ruler or a seam gauge to help you with this. I've sewn a lot of 1/4 inch seams, so I can eyeball it now, but you can use whatever tools you need to make sure that you're getting everything correct. And we're just going to press that down. We're going to do that all the way around. Okay, we're back where we started. So I'm going to just press down that last little bit. Now we're going to do that one more time, but instead of folding it over 1/4 inch, we're going to fold it over 3/4 inch. That is going to help us have enough room in there to hold our drawstring. So you want to make sure that your seam here is lined up with your seam line here. Give it a little press. And then get started around the perimeter the same way you just did that 1/4 inch seam, or that 1/4 inch fold over. Okay, we've got that finished. So you can do that to both of your booties, and then you're ready to go back over to your sewing machine and sew this down. Before we do that though, I'm going to iron my drawstring because I need to press that a little bit before I sew it. So what I'm going to do is just fold this in half, and if you're working on production and you're trying to go fast, you can actually just finger press this without using your iron and kind of just give it a good press like that, and it'll stay for you. So if you're trying to get a lot of these done in a short period of time, you can skip using the iron, but just for the purpose of showing you how to do this, I'm going to go ahead and use my iron. So you'll go ahead and just fold it over the whole way down and give it a good press. Once you have your casing ironed down into place, you can take the arm off of your sewing machine, and to do that I just slide mine off like this, and that just gives me a smaller workspace to be able to fit my fabric around. So what you're going to do is open up your shoe cover here and get just one side of it over on your machine. You may have to maneuver it a little bit, but just do your best. Okay, I'm going to start right here at this side seam, and I'm going to position the fabric so that my needle is going to be hitting the fabric about 1/8 inch away from the bottom edge of that casing where we folded that fabric under. We're going to backstitch to start. And then we're going to sew all the way around this whole pouch basically, and we're going to leave about 1 inch open at the end so that we can fit our drawstring in when we're finished. So I'm going to go ahead and sew all the way around. Keep your eye on the edge of your casing here and make sure it's staying lined up so that you're catching that fabric. You can go as slowly as you need to make sure that your seam is straight. And then once you have about 1 inch of space left, go ahead and backstitch. Go forward to finish that off, and then clip your threads. You'll need to clip one from this side and one from this side. And then you'll also need to clip where our seam started over here. So now our shoe cover is sewn, and we just need to insert our drawstring. To do that, we first need to sew the drawstring. So let me show you how to do that. I have our drawstring that we folded in half and pressed here. You can finger press it if you don't want to use the iron. But what we're going to do is position this so that the raw edge of the drawstring is about 1/8 of an inch away from where our needle is going to hit the fabric. Go ahead and backstitch to start. Then sew all the way down the whole length of the drawstring, keeping your raw edge lined up about 1/8 of an inch away from the needle. If you are using a quilting cotton for this instead of a batik, again, your drawstring will be folded in half right sides together because we're going to turn this inside out here in a little bit. With the batik, it doesn't matter, but just so you know, if you're using a quilting cotton, you want to be looking at the wrong side of the fabric right here. Okay, we're going to backstitch to finish this seam, and then we can trim all our threads. Now, if you have loose threads coming off of your raw edge, you can trim those off. But again, if you're in a hurry, it's fine not to. This is all going to be enclosed inside the drawstring. So what we're going to do now is take a safety pin. I'm using a large quilter's pin, but you can use whatever you have on hand. In fact, a smaller safety pin might even be easier. And you're going to insert it into the fabric so that it only goes through one layer of the fabric. Then you're going to bring it up through the layers of fabric, so it's right in between those two layers in the middle, and close it. You shouldn't be able to see any safety pin coming through on the back side of your fabric. And now we're going to use this to help us turn this inside out. So go ahead and send your safety pin down inside your drawstring and start to turn your drawstring inside out. It can take a little bit of coaxing here at the beginning, but once you get past that first bit of fabric that is a little bit stubborn, it becomes a lot easier. So you'll want to pull until you get most of it straightened out, and then you can scrunch a little bit more, pull again, and you can see how much easier that was the second time. So you'll just keep doing that until your whole drawstring is turned right side out, and then that raw edge will be encased inside the drawstring. And then once you get to the edge, you just pull and keep pulling until the whole drawstring is right side out. Now we can remove this safety pin for a minute so that we can finish the ends of our drawstring. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and press this flat, and then I'll be right back. To finish these ends, you can do one of two things. You can fold it over about 1/4 of an inch, and then fold it over again another 1/4 of an inch, and sew a seam right here to just hold that in place and finish off that end. Or you can tie it in a little bit of a knot. I prefer to go ahead and close off that seam so that the raw edges don't fray. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then trim off your extra threads. One thing that's nice to do is to make sure that you're folding over each side in the same direction. Just gives it a nice uniformity that helps it look more finished. Now we're ready to insert our drawstring into our shoe cover. So find that area of your shoe cover where you didn't finish your seam. You left that 1.5 inch gap or so. And then go ahead and grab your safety pin again and attach it to your drawstring. Then you're going to insert the safety pin through that hole in your casing, and you're going to just thread the drawstring through. Be as careful as you can not to twist the drawstring because it will just help it to lay flat and be a little bit neater. We're back to that same hole in our casing, so we're going to go ahead and pull the drawstring through, remove the safety pin, and then give a little bit of a tug to open up the rest. Okay, so we have our drawstring in. We're almost finished, and make sure that both ends of your drawstring are about even there. Turn your shoe cover right side out. Okay, we finished the sewing part of this tutorial. Now we need to add a non-slip coating to these because these are very slippery. They're just cotton. If you put them on over your shoes and try to walk around, your feet will slide a little bit, and we don't want that happening to our medical professionals. We want to keep them as safe as possible. So we're going to go ahead and open this up, and to do that, I am going to spread this apart like this so that we end up with a corner here. And then I'm going to do the same on this side so that we end up with this kind of misshapen diamond, but our two seams are here at the edges, so we have a diamond shape. There are a number of different methods you can use to add some kind of non-slip protection to the sole of the shoe cover. You can use 100% silicone clear caulking, and you can do dots of that along areas where somebody's toes and the heel of their foot and the ball of their foot would be, even maybe a little bit in the middle. You can also potentially use some kind of liquid rubber or liquid latex, as long as it's heat safe and will survive multiple washings. You can experiment and see what you like best. I'm going to be working with Tulip Puffy Paint, which is a 3D fabric paint that my mom actually used when I was a kid to make my socks non-slip, and it lasts through the wash. You can get this online or at a craft store. It's usually sold as 3D paint or fabric paint or non-slip paint. You can also use a product called Plasti Dip, Plastidip, and you can get that sometimes at a hardware store or online. Go ahead and shake it well, and then I am going to paint zigzag lines, 3 of them, over the sole of this shoe cover. And I'm going to make them quite thick and fill them in so that there's quite a lot of grippy area or traction. I've tried doing this by just using dots in rows or a grid, but it didn't give me quite enough traction. And I also tried doing thinner zigzags, and that didn't work quite as well as I would have liked either. But the test I did that had these thicker kind of Charlie Brown shirt style chevron stripes worked very well. So that's what I'm going to be sticking to. You can experiment to see what works best for you. After you've painted your stripes onto your shoe cover, you'll want to let this air dry for 4 hours before you use it or test it. And then after 72 hours, it's washable. So you need to let it dry for 4 hours and then kind of cure for 3 days, and then it's able to be washed. So what I would recommend is to apply your puffy paint or whatever you're using. What you're using may make the instructions vary a little bit, but I would recommend applying your non-slip and then letting it dry overnight, and then waiting 3 days to launder the product. If you are using this like I am, it'll be 3 days before this is ready to be washed and donated. If you need to donate them right away, make sure that you include a note that says washable on this day, paint curing or something, so that they know not to use it before then. So I'm doing these 3 zigzag strips. That seemed to work really well on the test that I did, and I'm just going to lay this flat in an area where it can air dry away from pets and any dust that could get into the paint, and after it's all dry, it'll be ready to use. To use these, the health professional can slip them on over their shoes and use the drawstring to tighten the shoe cover over their shoe at the ankle. It works fine for me with my 5.5 shoe, and I also tested it on my husband's foot with his size 13 shoe, and it worked just as well. This is one of the tests that I did just to make sure that my pattern was on the right track and that the puff paint was going to work. But it's obviously very messy, but I just wanted to show you what the puff paint looks like when it's dry. So it kind of flattens out a little bit more and feels a lot like a plastic coating. And it works really well as a non-slip option. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what that looks like.